In a Violent Nature is the latest experimental horror movie currently in theaters. I first talked about this movie a couple of months ago on my channel in the video titled Most Exciting Horror Movies Upcoming, and the reason I thought it was one of the most exciting upcoming horror movies is because of its concept. Although it follows a storyline extremely similar to something you'd see out of a Friday the 13th movie, instead of following the dumb-witted campers, it's told from the perspective of the killer. Recently, it's premiered at a lot of film festivals, and even select theaters across the nation have already played it, so audiences have given their opinion on the movie, and it's ranging from brilliant to boring. Last night I finally got around to watching it myself, and I am torn between these two descriptions. This won't be like my typical reviews. As a big fan of horror, and more specifically slashers, this is a movie that fascinated me, and I kind of want to dissect it a little further. But I don't want it to just be about my opinion. I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about In a Violent Nature? Do you like this experiment? Do you think more movies should do this? Were you disappointed with the execution and were demanding your money back? Saw a lot of people doing that. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts down below. So every now and then we get a horror movie that tries to challenge the genre. Films like The Blair Witch Project, a film so impactful it still gets paid homage to this very day. And then there's movies like Skinamarink that are interesting, unique experiences into the horror sphere, but for me personally, did not hit.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
While In a Violent Nature is not the first horror movie to be told from the perspective of the killer, its approach in literally putting the camera right behind the slasher stalker and treating the tone of the movie almost like a nature documentary is, I think, what's really helping it stand apart. Now, when it comes to whether this is brilliant or boring, well, let's get on to the brilliant. For one, I think for all intents and purposes, this is a Friday the 13th movie. Its storyline and character feel like they're literally ripped out of a Jason Voorhees film. The movie starts off with a group of campers who happen to find a resting site for Johnny. He's been buried there for over 60 years after a horrible crime happened, and the thing most keeping him at rest is this gold locket that belonged to his mother, letting him remain buried. But when a camper decides to take that golden locket, Johnny will be resurrected and will do everything he can to get that locket back. So essentially, both Johnny and Jason, mama's boys. You want your mommy, big boy? And this is the part I really enjoyed because it sticks to this POV of the killer for better or worse. For the minute Johnny is resurrected and brought back into the world, we are following him from his POV, seeing a person that was really far away as Johnny just walks closer and closer until they're just eventually at the grasp of his hand. There's even a point in the movie where we see him go through a costume change and we find his mask and weapon of choice. All stuff that we don't really get a focus in on when we're watching a typical slasher movie. I even love the way it would give us nuggets of information through the POV of the killer, because as he's approaching a campsite where there's some people around a fire or inside a cabin, you get nuggets of information to what these characters are like, which are just typical stereotypes of victims in a horror movie. They run through the scary origin of Johnny and the urban legend that he roams around the woods just like people would during a Friday the 13th movie, and tell the story of Jason at Camp Crystal Lake.
I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
And as Johnny is coming in and out of the camp, going from victim to victim, progressively throughout the movie, you see the victims trying to devise a trap for Johnny, how to fight back against Johnny, using your thousands of hours of horror movie knowledge that you've seen in the past to fill in the clues of what probably happened in between. I thought that was really fun. But the last outstanding, brilliant thing this movie did, before we get into some of the more boring aspects, were the gory, graphic kills, and more specifically, one very awesome kill that basically saved this movie for me. While it becomes very apparent throughout the movie there is a budgeting limit on this film, and there was only so much they could do, because sometimes there is moments where it's a cutaway kill, where it's an implied death. They do their best with what they can, and you do get a couple of gory ones here and there, but all the money went to the one yoga kill. This is something you have to see for yourself to experience, because wow, did this movie not only wake me up from my chair, it got me wanting to clap, laugh, and just scream, yes, baby. These are the kind of kills I live for in a horror movie. I don't want to get into too much detail because I think you should experience it for yourself, but the entire sequence of Johnny going after this person who was doing yoga in the woods was the biggest highlight of the film, and honestly just should have showcased you the true execution of what they should have gone for with this movie. It's a kill that's not only gory, graphic, and filled with great practical effects, it's also funny and meta with a double meaning, because I'm not calling it a yoga kill because the girl was doing yoga. But if you've seen it, you know why we call it the yoga kill now. Bringing me now into the boring and the things that I just really are holding me back from recommending this movie to you.
You're just boring, that's all.
Like I said, this follows the POV of the killer, and that's for better or worse. Think about Jason Voorhees. Think about Michael Myers. In fact, Michael already had a scene in one of his most recent movies that is a lot like In a Violent Nature. In the Halloween 2018 film, we got a minute-long sequence of just following Michael's POV. And you gotta admit, this is one of the best scenes of the 2018 movie, and it makes you think, oh, I could see an entire movie of just Michael doing this walking, finding a shed, grabbing a weapon, walking into someone's house, and doing what he does. You think that, but then you gotta get into those moments where there's nothing but walking, baby. Oh my God, I cannot tell you how much now I hate the sound of crunching grass. Make it stop! There is no score and there is no music aside from the music that gets played by the characters throughout the film. It's filmed a lot like a documentary, just taking in the nature sounds, and that crunching grass, it'll get on your nerves halfway into the movie. There is a lot of walking, so much so, and I felt like that's a necessary evil. You need to show that, okay? Because that is just a side of being a serial killer that is part of the job, right? You gotta walk to your destination. But I think this is then where the execution and in choosing what to show really should have came in handy for this movie. You can show us for the first 10-15 minutes that this is something that needs to happen, but as the movie continues on, you should cut those walks down severely, and they do not. It feels like almost these walks were put on purpose to just pad out the runtime because they did not have enough material for a full hour and 30 minutes, which is the standard for most films. The thing also that gets slightly ruined when you're now following the perspective of the killer and you can't cut the camera away is the mysterious teleportation technique that Michael or Jason have, where even though you're sprinting away from them, Usain Bolt style, somehow with their walking ability, they will catch up or they will end up in front of you. The movie never really even attempted to kind of subvert that or do their own version of that. You just painfully see them walking, and instead the movie just relies on cliche character tropes of people like tripping, falling, or landing on bear traps on how Johnny is able to catch them up going 1 mile per hour. And even though the main draw of this movie is to follow the perspective of the killer, the film breaks his rules several times, kind of ruining the immersion. While I will say for 70 to 60% of the movie, you are just literally having the camera right behind Johnny following him, the lack in creativity or being able to do something with him happens, and then the camera will just cut to a regular scene of just zooming in on characters, making it feel like a regular slasher movie. This was most particular in the scene when we were around the campfire and the characters were telling us the urban legend of Johnny. It's a painfully long scene, and it's only made worse by the fact that the director chose only one specific shot for this entire sequence, and that's just to have the camera going in a complete circle around the campfire for about 5 minutes. And oh my God, if you are dizzy, if you get lightheaded, car sick, this scene is not going to be for you, because they are just talking about this urban legend, telling you all about it, and the camera just continuously spinning in a circle, and we don't know what Johnny's doing at this time. We saw him walk up to this camp, but no. And that's where I think the movie missed out on giant opportunities to showcase things a slasher killer would do in this situation. You could still let us hear from Johnny's perspective, them around the campfire telling his origin. That way the audience can also know a little detail about Johnny. But as this is happening, instead of just letting him stand there for about 5 minutes staring at them, you should have had Johnny doing things around the campsite, popping some tires, going to the cabin and cutting power lines, cutting phone lines, finding personal items like cell phones or maybe even weapons and hiding them, disarming them. With the pace that Johnny walks at, you could have gotten away with us seeing him do all this while still receiving the information by the actors. And even getting back to the movie breaking its own rules, I feel like this maybe could have been better if it didn't take the nature documentary approach that it was trying to stick to. And I say trying to stick to because there are several times in this movie, specifically when Johnny is finally about to kill somebody, that the movie switches from this nature documentary POV to then just being shot like a regular movie. And by regular movie, I just mean like the way you would see a film when Michael's about to take someone down, when Jason's about to take someone down, where it cuts to several different cameras, different angles, and even weirdly, I think they used higher quality cameras for these sequences, so the movie goes from looking 720p one moment to then looking 4K quality for about like 2-3 minutes then it goes back to 720p quality following Johnny throughout the woods, and that switch was just really odd. In true fashion, like a lot of older slasher movies, the characters' acting and dialogue is atrocious. The dialogue in this movie is so painful, and the main reason for that is because it's trying to give the audience key words and phrases because you only get such limited time of Johnny walking by, so you get a small understanding of the story, and because of that, the characters talking doesn't sound natural. It sounds like they're literally talking to the audience, almost like theater dialogue, not natural at all, and these sort of setbacks really hinder the film and this cool experiment they were trying. I'm glad I saw this movie, and at the end of the day, I'm willing to say I liked it. I don't really know how often I'll want to go back and see this, but I would love to see more attempts of either Johnny or other killers. I still feel like there's so much more that could be done. And you know, the more I described of what I think the potential of this movie could be and why I would want them to attempt this again, I come back to the movie Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. This is a movie you might have heard of that released in 2006, and it's told from the perspective of the killer, but it's also a satire or parody of slasher movies. It's a guy whose main goal is wanting to be the next Michael Myers, the next Freddy Krueger, the next Jason Voorhees, and it's told from this documentary style of him taking the steps to do that, and then even switching tones halfway into the movie of just becoming a regular slasher film. It's like a movie that's so brilliant ahead of its time, but it's kind of only really a cult classic. I still respect In a Violent Nature because it had the bold enough approach to show you the boring and dull side of what it is to be Jason Voorhees, and that experiment on its own was pretty cool. I think eventually somebody's probably going to find a way to edit down this movie and just make it an hour long, cutting out a lot of the fat within it, and I think that'll be a lot more digestible, enjoyable version for a lot of people. So yeah, look, at the end of the day, I appreciate this movie a lot more than maybe I ended up liking. I think we need movies like this that challenge the genre, try doing something new. If it works, great. You spawn so many other movies that'll pay homage to your film, and if it doesn't, we just keep continuing on. I think if you're a really big fan of slashers, it's something you should experience and check out once. But if the sound of a dead guy walking through the woods for long periods of time with crunching leaves in the background sounds irritating to you, maybe stay away from this one and just Google that one kill whenever it hits YouTube. The movie, I think, comes out on Shudder within the next couple of weeks or months. I do think you should give it a shot, but I'm extremely hesitant to tell you to go check it out in theaters. Anyways, guys, that's just my opinion on A Violent Nature. I'm going to be curious to hear from you guys. What did you love? What did you hate about this movie? What little tweaks or things they could have changed in the execution that you felt could have elevated the film? Would you want to see another one? I'm not going to lie. I would love to see them try again with a little bit more money. Anything, everything, be sure and like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.